In this video, I'm going to show you how to attack a word problem, and we're just getting started on this. This is really just a basic introduction to using algebra to solve problems. So let's go ahead and get started. So here it says this. By the way, notice the directions. Write a linear equation that models each problem. Use the equation to solve the problem. So these are simple problems that you could probably solve without algebra, but the whole point here is to learn how to use algebra to solve problems. So that's what we'll be doing, and that's what I would expect to see when you do your problems. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, if you look at this problem here, we're supposed to find some number. Let's see, it says the sum of 5 and 3 times a number is 59. So we got to find the number. So that's our variable. That's what we're looking for. We're going to call it x. So sum means add. So what are we going to add? Well, we've got 5 and 3 times a number. So we're calling our number x. So 3 times a number, well, first of all, we're going to add 5 and 3 times the number. So 3x is 3 times the number. We're adding that to 5. Now it says that the sum is 59. When we see is in a sentence like this, we treat it like an equation, and so this is just equal to 59. So this is just a basic two-step equation, so you should subtract 5 on both sides. You're going to get 3x equals 54. We'll divide each side by 3. And so we're going to get 18, which is our answer. That's the number that works here. You could actually plug that in. 5 plus 3 times 18 should equal 59. If you check it, you'll see that that does work. Alright, so again on number 2, we're trying to find a number. Now notice it says 6 subtracted from 8 times a number is 34. So let's look at something a little more simple. What if we said 5 subtracted from 8? So you got to be careful with how we use the word subtraction here. We're subtracting 5 from 8. So we actually start with the 8 and subtract off 5. So the order here is kind of backwards. And it's important when you're dealing with subtraction that your order is correct. So here we have 8 times a number, and we're going to be, it says 6 subtracted from 8 times a number, so we're going to start with the 8 times the number and subtract off 6. And is, again, is equal, so that needs to equal 34. So again, we have a two-step equation. We'll add 6 to both sides, and you can see here that x is going to be 5. And so our number here is 5. Again, if you plug it back into the equation, you can see that it works. On number 3, again, we're finding a number. So if you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to try this one. And then you can check your answer. Alright, so it says 12 less than 5 times a number. So this is kind of like the subtraction problem on number 2, or the subtracted. Less than, again, you got to watch the order. If you want 12 less than 100, you would start with 100 and subtract off 12. If you want 12 less than 5 times a number, you got to start with 5 times a number and subtract off 12. This is 12 less than 5 times a number. So you want to be able to read that and make sense out of it. So hopefully in the future you'll be able to translate these types of phrases correctly. So this is equal to 78. Again, a two-step equation. We'll add 12 to both sides and divide by 5. And we're going to get 18. Alright, let's move on. So on number 4, it says the length of a rectangular garden is 3 yards less than twice its width. The perimeter of the garden is 36 yards. Find the length and the width. So we're going to have to find two things, the length and the width. Now with a problem like this, it makes sense to draw a picture. I always draw a picture if it'll help me to solve a problem. So there's my rectangle. Let's see, it says the length is 3 yards less than twice its width. So if I knew its width, I know the length is 3 less than twice the width. So we want to start by labeling the width on my rectangle. Now in algebra, we normally label the smaller side the width just to be consistent. So it says the length is 3 yards less than twice the width. Well, twice the width is 2w, and we want 3 less than that, so that's going to be 2w minus 3. So if we can label the length using w, so in other words, we write it as 2w minus 3, then we're just using one variable, which is what we want. So I don't need it to write w for the width and l for the length. I can write the length as 2 times the width minus 3. Now I also know the opposite sides, w and 2w minus 3. And here it says the perimeter of the garden is 36 yards. Now remember, perimeter is found by adding the outsides of the figure. So in this case, we have 2 widths and 2 lengths. So it's going to be w, and we're going to add a length, 2w minus 3. We've got another w, and another 2w minus 3. All I'm doing is adding the outside lengths. And that needs to add up to 36. So here, notice we've got a couple of w's, one w. Remember, no w, if it's just w, it's understood to be 1w. So we're adding 1w and 2w and another 1w and 2w. We're going to get 6w. Notice you got the 2 minus 3's. That's going to add up to a minus 6. And that needs to equal 36. We'll add 6 to both sides. And we get 7. Now we have to remember we're supposed to find the length and the width. We've found the width. So the width is 7 yards. We're dealing with yards here. So to find the length, we need to use the 2w minus 3. And we know w is 7. And so we're going to get 14 minus 3. And so we're going to get 11. And so our length is 11. And again, everything's in yards here. All right, let's move on to number 5. It says a rental car or a car rental agency charges $180 per week plus 25 cents per mile to rent a car. So it's $180 just to rent the car, and then they're going to charge me an additional 25 cents per mile. So it says here, how many miles, or asks, how many miles can you travel in 1 week for $3.95? Well, let's see. We're supposed to find the number of miles. Whoops, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention something up above. Let's take care of that first. I forgot to mention on number 4, we actually have a formula for perimeter. The perimeter is equal to 2 widths plus 2 lengths, which we can see on our rectangle. We have 2 widths and 2 lengths. And so then we know the perimeter is 36. We said the width is w, so that's just going to be 2 times w, because we called our width w. And then we called our length 2w minus 3, so it's going to be 2 times 2w minus 3. So instead of doing it the way that I did it on the left, I could use this formula and then just solve this equation, and you would also get 7. All right, so now let's move on to number 5. So again, we're looking for the number of miles that we can travel if we're spending $3.95. So there's our variable. We'll call it m. If you want to call it x, that's fine. Whatever you want to call it, m seems like a good choice here. So our charges are going to include $100, $180, plus 25 cents per mile. Well, let's see. Now sometimes people will do this, but this is saying $100, $180 plus 25 cents. It's 25 cents per mile, so we need to put an m here. Notice if you traveled 2 miles, you would pay $180 plus 2 times 25 cents. So you need that m there to indicate that you're paying 25 cents per mile. And we need this total to add up to $3.95. So again, this is just a 2-step equation. We're going to want to add subtract 180 on each side. And then next we'll be dividing each side by 0.25. And you get 860 here. And so our answer is 860 miles. All right, let's move on. All right, on number 6, actually 6 and 7 are just like the two that we just did. So I'd encourage you to stop the video and see if you can solve these using the same procedure, and then you can check your answers. All right, let's go ahead and get started on this. So it says the length is 8 inches more than the width. So let's draw a rectangle. Let's put in our width, and our length is 8 more than the width. So that would be W plus 8. So we know the other sides are W and W plus 8. I'm going to go ahead and use the formula this time. We know 2 widths plus 2 lengths is equal to 24. Now if you want to just add the 4 sides like we did before, that's fine. I'm actually going to use the formula here. And we know that the perimeter is 24. I already put that in. We do need to put in, we know that 2 times W here is our width, so we don't need to do anything there, but the length, we should plug in W plus 8 for length, and this equals 24. So let's see, we need to distribute here. We'll get 2W plus 16. So basically we're simplifying right now, and we can still combine those like terms, the 2 W's, and notice now we're down to a 2-step equation. So we'll subtract 16 on both sides, and you can see that W is going to be 2. So we just go, let's see, we need to find the length now. So we know the length is W plus 8, so our W we found to be 2, and so our length is 10. So your answer is going to be, the width is 2 inches and the length is 10 inches. Now I want to point out something here that's true with all these word problems, and that is you can check these. Remember, we said that 2 times the width plus 2 times the length should be 24. So if we actually plug in our numbers, 2 is our width and 10 is our length, notice we get 4 plus 20 equals 24, and that works. So I really encourage you to check your answers and make sure they work, especially when you take your test or your quiz. This will be helpful because you'll know that you did it right, and if not, hopefully you can go back and figure out where your mistake is. Let's look at number 7. So this time we have to find the number of hours that we were charged for a carpet cleaning service. Our charges, so actually let me set my variable. Let's call it X. You may have chosen H perhaps. Doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and let's see, our charges are going to be $40 plus $22.50 per hour, and that needs to equal $96.25. That's what we were actually charged. So by solving this equation, we can figure out how many hours we actually paid for. So we'll subtract 40. Again, this is just a 2-step equation. We'll divide next. Again, our goal is always to get X by itself. And so you should get 2.5 here. So our answer is 2.5 hours. And let's see, again, I would remind you could check your answer. We know that 40 plus 22.50 times 2.5 should equal 96.25. And if you check that, you'll see that it does work. All right, there's one last problem here I want to do with you. Now, one of the things we want to be able to do is take the skills we've learned and try them on a new problem. So that's why I said challenge here. I would encourage you to see if you can do this one using the same kind of process, even though it's a little different type of problem. It's quite different actually. But use the same process and you can solve this problem. So see if you can do that, and then you can check the solution here. Alright, so we need to find the third test score so that these three tests are going to have an average of 80. So we've got a 76 and a 79 on the first two. We've got to figure out what we need on the third so that our average is 80. Well, when we take the average of three numbers, which is what we're going to be doing, we have three tests here, we have to add the three numbers and divide by how many there are, and that gives us our average. We're going to do the same thing here. The first thing we need to do, though, is let's pick or explain what our variable represents. In this case, that's going to be the third test score. So we want to add the three test scores, and again, if we're going to find the average, we want to divide by how many there are. In this case, there's 3. And if we want an average of 80, we need this to equal 80. So there's how we use algebra to solve this. Now this equation's a little bit different looking than what we've handled before. If you look on the left, we have division by 3. And so I'd really like to get rid of that fraction. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So if you multiply these two fractions, the 3's actually cancel. So what you're left with is 76 plus 79 plus x. And so we're going to get, actually don't forget to multiply the other side by 3, we're going to get 240. Let's go ahead and add our two numbers here together. And so we get 155 plus x equals 240. And let's subtract 155 on both sides, and you're going to get 85. And again, I would remind you that you can easily check this answer, and if you average 76, 79, and 85, you will find that they do average to 80. And that's the end of this lesson.